Welcome to the Retaining Wit podcast. I'm Jossie Haines.
And I'm Jordanna, Kwok.
This show tackles the challenges of keeping women in tech.
Each episode, we discuss current events, experiences in the industry, and what it takes to create a workplace where women will thrive. Today on Retaining Wit, we are very excited to be chatting with Dr. Maria Kazandijeva, co-founder at Graft, an early-stage startup on the mission to make modern AI accessible to everyone. Thank you, Maria, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome. It's so good to have you here. Maria, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Graft, and what you do there?
Jossie, Jordanna, thank you so much for having me over. I would love to tell you about Graft first and then about myself, because I'm going to argue that telling you about myself is in some ways more important for the listeners of the podcast. As you mentioned, I am at an early stage startup, Graft. I've been there since last April, and it's an AI company where we're aiming to take some of the latest technology in the machine learning space and make it accessible to the 99% of companies that do not have a dedicated infrastructure, dedicated teams, dedicated machine learning specialists to do some really cool stuff with data that we as humans generate. So if you think of a very kind of fun and simple example of taking a picture of my cat and wanting to find similar cats on the internet that look like him, floofy, black, with an attitude, that picture has some meaning to it, right? It doesn't matter if it's a JPEG or a PNG. It has the meaning of, hey, this is a black floofy cat and this is Maria's cat. And if you want to use machine learning to extract the meaning out of that picture and find similar pictures on the internet, right now you have to write a lot of code, you have to stand up a lot of infrastructure, and you have to have a large team of both engineers and machine learning scientists figuring out how to use the latest technology to do something as simple as similarity search. So really what we're trying to do at Graft is build a platform that makes that easier to do, even if you're not a machine learning expert. And I can say that pretty confidently because, as Jordanna knows, I come from Netflix previous to this. So I am definitely not a machine learning expert. And I'm doing machine learning tasks as a newbie, which feels very empowering. And so that's what we've been up to at Graft. What I do there is a funny question. I think we'll get a little bit more into the world of startups, but I do what needs to be done, the kitchen sink, and that's a lot of fun. And lastly, I should tell you about myself. And really the main thing I want to tell you about myself, especially for the listeners, is that I'm just a regular person. It's very easy to go and look me up on LinkedIn, and just like everybody else, LinkedIn makes you seem very fancy. I have jobs, I have degrees, I don't have to say them out loud. I went to school like many other people did. It's not that special, but I'm a regular person who has always liked tech, who likes adventure. I rent in Menlo Park in a one-bedroom apartment. I did my laundry yesterday while watching Netflix. I go and do my groceries. When I'm not working, I do other random stuff like regular people do. And so I always want to remind people that, because it's easy to listen to a podcast or to look at LinkedIn or to look at a TechCrunch article about our startup and feel like this person is very removed from who you are as a listener. But in reality, I'm just Maria, and I hang out with my cats and, I have to wash my floor and struggle to find the motivation to exercise. So I think that's probably the most important part of who I am. A regular person who likes tech, who likes learning, who likes building, and who also has to do their laundry on Sunday.
Yeah, I just did my laundry yesterday too. And all my chores, run all my errands. And instead of cats, I have to go and walk my dog twice a day.
There you go.
Yep. And as you mentioned, we know each other from Netflix, and you spent a few years there. How has the transition been leading at a large company and to building a small company from scratch?
I knew this question was coming, right? And so I thought about it, and I'm a terrible person to ask this question, I think, because I don't ponder transitions very much. I think I always try to look forward. I like to appreciate and remember a good thing that I've done in the past, but I try not to kind of get too worked up about, I don't have the thing I had in the past. I really try to focus on the future. Probably because way back when, I lived in Bulgaria and I moved to the US. And so I have this very big transition in my life at an early age. And I think the only way to survive that is by focusing on what's ahead of you and what you're excited about, and not kind of get, I think, drawn into the sadness and nostalgia that we sometimes feel about the thing that we've lost. Because I miss Netflix to this day. It was a great place to work, great people. I still talk to many of them. Now, in the context of a large company versus a startup, it was a little bit of a strange transition, I would say, because it happened still during the pandemic when we were working at home. And so I think perhaps it helped me that I already felt I had lost some things when we kind of, in a very quick manner, all had to start working from home. And I missed seeing people, and I missed the office, and gosh, I missed somebody else bringing lunch for me. So privileged in tech. But because I had experienced a little bit of, I think, a sense of loss by just being at home and not having the in real life experience of Netflix, then transitioning to a startup, I mean, I bought the same keyboard and the same mouse, and I was in the same bedroom with the same desk. Felt a little bit odd, but it was very quiet. It was very quiet. I didn't take any time off between working at Netflix and doing the startup. Friday was in April last year was my last day at Netflix. And on Monday, I was at the new job. But the new job had two of us, and we didn't have email yet. So my first task on my first day was actually to get Google Workspaces for us and set up our email. Then I set up Slack so that we could talk to each other in something that's not like, text messages or whatever. So it was very quiet at the beginning. That was probably the biggest difference. Now it's not quiet anymore because we have a lot more people. But it was just a little bit of an adjustment. And the other thing I would say is I had been at Netflix for a while. So I felt, hopefully warranted, but I felt that there were a lot of things at Netflix that I roughly knew what to do. I knew what I was doing, right? I'd been there. I knew the teams. I had done the job for a while. And I very quickly realized that I had no clue what I was doing at the startup because I was doing a lot of new things. And it became obvious that was very freeing and empowering because I very quickly stopped worrying about whether I knew what I was doing because it was clear that I didn't. And that was kind of table stakes. And if you start from that assumption, then it frees you to just learn and be open to not doing things perfectly and to just kind of, figuring it out along the way. So it was quiet at first, then it got very hectic. And along the way, it was just fun because so many random things came up. And I've always been the kind of person that I think likes the kitchen sink type of situation. So I focused on the new things that were coming my way because it was so many of them that I chose to maybe the way to honor my time at Netflix was to constantly be thinking, what is a parallel experience I had in the past from the big company, right? The corporation that I can take into this new role so that it can make me more effective or so that I can bring something good that I liked about Netflix. And so I tried to bridge kind of the past experience with the new experience in something that was productive and positive. And so on the days when I missed my coworkers and my old team at Netflix, I could say, hey, I missed them, but hey, I built that great team at Netflix. Now I get to do it again at a new company. So it was fun. Last year, April was fun. It was, you're in the same bedroom with the same keyboard, but you're doing something completely different. And for a couple of weeks, there's just two of you.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that story, Maria. And I'm curious, how did you end up in that new role?
It was a chance that I took, but it was a chance that found me. And I sometimes wish I had something to say that was more helpful than this, because I've been on the other side where I've seen somebody give a talk about an experience that they landed that, they thought was amazing and great growth opportunity. And I know that when I was on the other side at the conference or as a listener to a podcast, I always want a super actionable suggestion on how I can do it. And now I'm finding myself not having a good answer. The story is that a friend of mine from graduate school had been thinking about doing a startup in the machine learning space. And he was looking for folks who would be interested in building it with him. And he reached out and we reconnected. I said, yeah, of course, I'll chat with you. I wasn't actively looking for a job. I'm in Silicon Valley, so I have many friends who have startups, but I wasn't actively saying to myself, hey, 2021 is the year to do it. The opportunity found me. Now, saying the opportunity found me is not helpful and not actionable to somebody who's listening to me. What I do think is hopefully helpful is that the opportunity found me, and then I made a very conscious choice to take the opportunity. And I've had options in the past to do a startup with folks, and I turned them down. I either felt that, the idea just I wasn't as excited about personally, just for my own interests, or that there was something else that I first wanted to work on. But this one came along, and I've always loved working with data. That's kind of my connection. I love seeing what data hides, always loved hanging out with the data scientists at Netflix. And so the direction was interesting to me because I love poking at data. The area of work was effectively unknown to me because I have no machine learning experience prior to this experience. And that was probably the biggest thing where I looked at it and I was like, I'm going to take this thing because it's going to expose me to a whole new area of work. And so I wasn't actively looking, so I don't have great tips for that, but I do kind of always try to encourage people, even in one-on-one conversation, is to not close yourself from at least considering the opportunity, right? And just like I said, I've considered a couple of them in the last few years, and I turned a few down, and I ended up taking this one. And sometimes I think people say no to themselves too soon, right? Because it's kind of a weird feeling, right? I almost felt, when I was thinking about it, I almost felt like I was betraying Netflix in considering leaving. And it was actually quite emotional. I would say that was much more difficult emotionally for me than anything that I've done since then. It was considering a world in which I'm not at Netflix, a place that I love, with people, working with people that I love. And so I think people sometimes, even when the opportunity comes along, we're sometimes too quick to shut them down, either because you're nervous and you feel like you're betraying your current employee, or because you look at the opportunity and you say, hey, it's not a 100% match for my skills, which I've done in the past, and I really do not recommend it because skills are to be acquired. And the only way you're going to get new skills is by doing things that you don't already know what to do, right? Just like in life. And so I was grateful and just so lucky that Adam, our CEO, reached out to me, and it's somebody that I have known for many years, but just always respected as a person. And so it was an opportunity that I knew that I should seriously consider. That really helped. But then also a little bit inside me, kind of maybe, when people say FOMO, right? There was a bit of I think I'd rather regret taking a chance than regret not taking a chance. And I think that's a cliche when you say it. But I think in reality, a lot of us kind of mostly end up with regrets of things we didn't do. So I was like, you know what, this one, there's no guarantees. It's a startup. Who knows what's going to happen? But I just kind of want to see what happens. So keeping yourself open to the opportunity and not politely declining immediately just because you think maybe you can't do it, because chances are you can do it. Or at least that's what I tell myself.
I love your story. And you were talking about data. And one of the things I talk about a lot is inclusion, and the fact that so much of the underlying data that goes into so much of our machine learning and so many things is biased. And this impacts all the products in our daily lives. So I'm curious, how are you thinking about this at Graft?
100% yes to what you said. And I'll tell you a little something that happened before I had officially joined. I wrote down maybe, 5 or 6 bullet points for myself. So I wrote them down for myself in a Google document of things that are important to me value-wise to help me decide whether this is an opportunity I should really take. Without any coordination, it turns out Adam had also written down some things. And we send them to each other. Our emails crossed. I know this sounds like a made-up story, but our emails crossed. So I just sent him, I'm like, hey, these notes are for me, but I kind of want to share them with you. So he received my notes. I received his notes. And one of the things that had popped up in there, because it's important to me, is I was thinking about the space, and I was saying, okay, AI, machine learning, data, bias, all these things. And I had put down the note saying, look, it sounds like if we join forces, what we're trying to build is a way for more people to be able to use machine learning. But it also is a thing that I want to make sure I don't end up at a company where we're making effectively what I called morally questionable decisions. I'll probably get something wrong at some point, but I don't want to be one of those Silicon Valley people who looks back in 10 years and it's like, oh, I should have thought of this, right? You got to think of it ahead. And so what I had said is, look, we're dealing with machine learning, we're dealing with data. And so I want to make sure that we're on the same page, that things like bias are important. And not only are they important to us not to perpetrate, but they're actually so important to us. The whole point of having a machine learning platform that's not just developed and owned by Google or something and just used for their own use cases is that we can build in tools that other people who don't have access to 15 machine learning teams can actually use to look for bias in their data and stuff like that. And we've talked a lot about explainability, right? We're not generating the data. You bring your own data to our platform, but what are the tools that we can build that more people can, by default, when they come to the platform, they know that one of the things that they can be doing in this platform is looking for bias in the data, or that we give them tips and we say, hey, you gave us a bunch of pictures with labels, but you know what, like, of all the doctor labels, we detected that, 90% of the doctors were men. So we're just proactively going to recommend to you that you bring us some more labels, right? We're going to say, hey, your labeled data set is biased. And so I was thinking from the beginning of what are the gotchas, especially in the data space. And if I were to join a startup, first of all, I should be very clear with myself as to why I'm doing it, who I'm joining forces with, but also immediately start thinking about this thing that we're building. How can I put some of those values and make it easier for other people to kind of keep an eye out for these bad things that I also would like to keep an eye out for? And, I don't know, I'm going to get it perfect the first try, but my impression is that we, maybe as a tech people, a lot of times there's a pattern to the trouble we get into. And the pattern is some number of years have passed and to a bunch of people, the issue has been obvious, but then the person in charge is like, yeah, good point. I didn't notice this. And so for me as a co-founder, the job is I should be noticing now, right? And there's things that I will miss, but I should be actively, constantly asking myself, what am I noticing? Am I missing something? Because boy, oh boy, I do not want to be in the, wow, yeah, I didn't think I was going to undermine, XYZ because 10 years ago, I wasn't thinking about social implications or about diversity or about any of those things, and sitting in a kind of code-only ivory castle thinking that technology is safe from all the things that we as humans fall short in, essentially. You have to do it from the beginning. And honestly, it was probably part of what tipped me over to leave my previous job and do a startup, because maybe I'm flattering myself, but I want to have more people that are starting startups that are from the beginning thinking about that stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing how that came to be and how your notes kind of cross-referenced each other and they actually matched up pretty well. And something you mentioned there about learning, like that you're going to make some mistakes, but it's the openness to learn. So I'm interested, what have you learned so far being a co-founder?
Jordanna, what have I not learned? The only thing that I've learned is that there's always more to learn. There's maybe a grander, more abstract things that people can talk about. But the truth is that there's also a lot of small things that each thing is very small, but when you look at them together, I think they give you the appreciation for how much it goes into building a company. So probably the abstract thing that I've learned is it takes a lot to build a company, and it takes a lot of work that is sometimes not in the stereotypical glamorous category. It's work that will never, right, unless I give you examples, it's not going to be in a TechCrunch article. When we go and raise more money and, people interview us or whatever, my friends call me and they're like, wow, good job, Maria. All the little things that are actually the foundation of having a company that will remain invisible. And I think that's true at big companies as well. There's so many people, right? I'm just using Netflix as an example, given my experience, but there's just so much work that goes in. And the idea is that so much invisible work goes in so that the customer or the user can focus kind of on the, delightful experience. But just seeing it from the ground up is amazing. I have learned about payroll and taxes, right? I'm telling you, these are the non-glamorous specifics, but I think every time you learn something that's outside of your main area of work or discipline, A, you learn a new skill, but B, you learn how much you can stretch as a person. And C, I think you have a more vivid appreciation for people who do jobs different than yours. I think it's relatively easy, by no fault of anyone's, but I think it's relatively easy if you're a tech person at a big company to forget, right, that there's also a lot of non-tech people, for instance, that support you in all kinds of ways, right? Both, recruiting or HR, or, the people who prepare the food and keep you fed. And after you make your coffee, your dishes, disappear, your coffee cup gets washed, all of those things. And I think seeing it, building the company from the ground up, really, if you take advantage of that, and I think if you're sufficiently humble, it's a great reminder of how much goes into it. And you have an opportunity in other situations, you should thank and appreciate these other people, because, as I said, the first thing I did is set up our email. So I do IT, I did payroll for a while, I had to learn some obscure tax details. And I think all of the small, silly, specific things that need to get done, in some ways, I think that learning is more valuable because it's more humbling than the very big, grandiose stuff that I could have said. Oh, I learned how difficult it is to build from scratch. And, I learned to work in ambiguity. And I learned all those things. Of course, I learned how hard it is to make decisions when there's only a few of you. You really want somebody else to know what the right answer is, or to really disagree with you. So I learned all of these maybe personal things, but the little practical things are actually quite valuable and very eye-opening, and at least for me, give me more appreciation for what it takes to build things and the different aspects, non-tech aspects that go into it. It's kind of sometimes stressful, but sometimes fun way to peel a layer and see kind of how the internal things work.
Thanks for taking the time to share that. And, speaking of the non-technical things, one of the big things is creating values and culture. And so, how do you think about that as you're creating your new business?
The culture component was not in much detail, but it was in that list of bullet points or values. And I am being my most polite self when I'm talking to the two of you. But when I wrote the bullet points to myself, they were very direct because I'm a pretty direct person. And it basically said that I think at this point in my career, I could find a job when I needed one. And so I'm not going to go to a job where I work with a bunch of jerks. Like, that's what I said. It's like, I just don't want to do this anymore, right? It's like, I think many women, probably most women, have had some bad experience in the workplace, most likely caused by some form of bias or whatnot. I think things are moving in the right direction, but I do know that women are still experiencing a lot of there's things in the workplace that don't have place in the workplace or anywhere else, right? In terms of any discrimination, bias, like even the littlest things. And so when I wrote down my notes, I was like, I don't want to be in this environment. And I think it's easy in a startup to cut corners when it comes to culture and hiring sometimes because you're in a rush and the bank account is going down and you have to get to a product or whatever. But I don't want to be in that environment. I definitely don't want to create that environment. And probably the next step after I don't want to create that environment is, even if I'm a little bit scared, by becoming a co-founder, can I proactively help create an environment that is like what I want to work in, and it's something that other people would want to work in. And so we've been fairly thoughtful during interviews, right? We've had culture interviews from day one. For maybe for Jordanna and me, that can seem like a normal thing because we have them right at Netflix. But there's a lot of startups that do not at the beginning necessarily have a dedicated culture interview where they actually think how they're going to screen people. And we've really essentially thought about, are these people that are collaborative, people that are going to be humble when they're the expert, but brave when they're not the expert and they want to get help? Are their coworkers going to treat them with respect so that we can all learn together because it's a startup? Are we going to hire people who are joining because they want to say that they worked at a startup? Or are we going to hire people who genuinely just want to build things together? Right. And it's hard sometimes to suss it out. The team at Graft is amazing. They're smart, but they're also amazing because I can go to any of these people and ask them a question. And sometimes I ask the same question 3 times because I forget. And I know that they will be kind and will explain what's going on or answer my question. And I can tell that they're there because they want to do something together. Right? The goal is to work together, not to make yourself be a special person that's smarter than everybody else or that puts anybody else down. And I think that's the type of stuff that I think nobody wants, but sometimes we kind of get tricked into tolerating, especially as women. And I just don't care. Honestly, it's, as I said, that's the most direct way I can say it. I think people should be excited to be building things together and as a team and as humans, and to treat each other as humans and with respect first, and everything else comes after that. And I was the recruiting person at our company. I guess I still am. So I recruited almost everybody that's on the team, and I turned down people who were very smart and I'm sure could have built great things. But it felt in some cases that they really were more interested in the fact that they were smart than what they can accomplish together with a team. And I think that collaboration and openness to be part of a team and a team of humans is super important. It's hard as the company grows. I'm sure we'll have some challenges. So you'll have to call me back a couple of years and see how we do, or call up one of the people on the team and see if we've succeeded in building a culture that's actually pleasant to work in.
Yeah, we'll definitely check back in a few years. We should do like a
where are they now?
Where are they now? Yeah, 5 years from now, where are they now? What happened to Graft? Hopefully it'll be a successful IPO.
From your words to NASDAQ, Jordanna. Right?
Since we're on the topic of recruiting, what challenges have you encountered, especially in building a representative employee base, given the lack of financial resources compared to more established companies?
I think my answer maybe will be surprising to some people. I did a bunch of hiring at Netflix as well, and I would actually argue that the challenges are not that different. And I think people who say that they want to hire for having a diverse team and are not successful probably would not be successful in any situation. And the people who truly, truly care about it are successful to some extent. I still, there's all kinds of things that I want to do the next time around when we're hiring. And the reason I say this, and I will really keep this one short, is if you care to hire diverse teams, you have to sit your butt in the chair and do the work. There's actually no shortcuts. And I think it is extremely challenging for technical people. It's a hard concept. And I'll tell you why, because I've been an engineer all my life. And what do? We want to make things more efficient, and we want to automate things. And we want to figure out how we can batch process things, and how when something takes, we've done something 3 times, we want to make sure that the 4th time it gets like kicked off by a cron job or some whatever automated process. And unfortunately, and I know this will be hard to hear maybe for some hiring managers out there, unfortunately, if you want to hire for diversity, you have to both work hard and smart. You can still be smart about expanding your network, going to events, all the things that the millions of people have said already. I don't have to repeat. But the truth is that you have to work hard and you have to talk to more people in order to find the people that you want. Because the reality is, if you only interview 10 people, chances are they're all going to be white dudes. No offense to the white dudes. I like them very much. But if you want to hire women on your team, you're just going to have to talk to more people, and it's going to take a little bit longer. But our team has a good mix of people. It is not perfect for whatever definition of perfect. But the truth is, if you're motivated and you're willing to spend the time, and it was important to me to have other different people on our team, if you spend the time, it pays off, but you have to work hard and you have to stay disciplined because it doesn't pay off until it pays off. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of grunt work that you have to do until you find your people. But, it's been amazing to have a variety of people on the team. We're getting different perspectives, people coming from different backgrounds, even different educational backgrounds, right? And the truth is that you kind of have to put in the hours.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. I think, like you said, as engineers, sometimes we just want those 5 steps to magically solve the problem. And this is a hard work type problem. We can't optimize it.
Yeah.
So as our last question for the evening, leading the startup is obviously tough. Are there any women leaders you look up to or are hoping to emulate as you're leading this journey?
I thought about this question and I had 2 options. I could go and look up and come up with some specific women. And then I realized that I should be honest. And the answer was no, nothing came up immediately to my mind. But I'll tell you why. Maybe I'm one of those weird people. I think I'm in Silicon Valley. I already breathe more tech than I should. And so what I personally found inspirational is thinking about women outside of tech. Honestly, even regular people. I think there's so much perspective to be had for us, both in tech, but as women in tech. And sometimes I think kind of comfort, perhaps on a hard day, to also have the broader perspective of there's so many women out there working different jobs that are likely more important than my job, honestly, who don't have the tech perks and shine of the job and who do so many more things that are difficult. I generally just look at women. I look at the world and I look at all of the challenges that women experience, and they're, still building businesses and running for office and, schooling their own kids while also, schooling an entire classroom or whatever. And so I think I want to see more successful women in tech, and we have some. We can definitely have more, and I think that's great because role models are important within tech. I want somebody who's graduating college now to be able to say, "Oh, look at Maria. She is some random person. I can be like her and also be a random person who's a co-founder." I think that's great. But for those of us who are already in tech and are sometimes having a hard day or questioning ourselves or saw some stupid thing online about, I don't know, women can't do tech or who knows what, right? Some of those tropes, the silly tropes. I think the thing that gives me strength in those moments is looking out into the world and seeing women slaying it in so many different ways outside of tech. I'm just like, we can definitely do tech, and actually we can do all these other things, and we're doing them pretty darn well. And that gives a bit of a fire. So no specific role models, but I just want to remind women that they're doing amazing things in and outside of tech, and they're surrounded by other women. Some of them they know, some of them they don't know, who are also just, doing hard, amazing things and doing them while also shouldering more of the stuff at home or more of the emotional labor or whatever. So it's just being a woman in a kind of I know this is silly, but the sisterhood of women in general is plenty of energy for me to draw upon.
We like to end each episode with a retaining wit tip of the week. And for this week, Maria, I'm wondering if you have any advice for our listeners.
If you are a manager, and especially a male manager, my advice is you already know how to retain employees because women retain better than men. So ask yourself, what am I doing that's retaining the men? I should start doing that with the women. Am I giving more feedback? Am I giving more opportunities? Am I giving more recognition? Am I giving higher impact projects, right? Let's just, guess what? Women are people. Let's just treat them all like people. We know how to retain. We can do it for women. You can also do things for the men, by the way. because if you provide support for the men, and for example, in their family life, that also means that the women on the other side of this, in the case where it's a woman or the other partner, also, gets helped. So I think people know how to retain people in tech. This is my controversial tip of the week is we know how to retain people in tech. The problem is that some of the things we're doing for men, we're not doing for women. So let's empower and elevate women and give them impactful work, and let's respect them. If you're a woman listening and you're figuring out how to retain yourself, just remember about the sisterhood. You've got this. Women are pretty freaking strong. They're physically strong. They're mentally strong. They're emotionally strong. We all have crap days. If you're not a woman, you also have crap days. So you can, do something to hug a cat or something like that and pull through, because you're inspiring the generations behind you. But you're also inspiring me, as I was saying, knowing that you're already in tech and you're hanging out with me and you're there gives me energy. And so I'm hoping that knowing that I'm in tech and I have no plan of going anywhere, regardless of what other people think, hopefully gives you energy as well, so that we're effectively retaining each other, which is like a little buddy system that we can do.
I love that. Yes. One of the things I tell women all the time is we need to be networking more so we stay more in tech, because the men are doing it a ton more than we are.
Absolutely.
Well, Maria, thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed having you on the podcast, and we'll definitely do that 5-year reunion.
Thank you so much. It's been kind of the maybe first opportunities for me to reflect a little bit on the last year. And also in that sisterhood of women, I think the two of you are doing an amazing job, because what you're doing is you're sharing women's stories so that I can be on one podcast, but I can go and listen to all the other podcasts that you have. And I think that is a critical way that reminds me that on a, stressful day, I'm not alone and somebody else is doing something awesome. So thank you for bringing the stories to life.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Retaining Wit podcast. You can keep up with our latest episodes at retainingwit.com, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast shows.